Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to dive into a topic that has recently been gaining attention across the world, the rising tensions between Israel and Yemen, and the question many are asking, is there a war on the horizon? This issue is not only about two countries standing against each other, but about a much larger geopolitical puzzle that involves alliances, regional conflicts, and control over some of the most important maritime routes in the world. When we look at the situation between Israel and Yemen, it is important to understand that they do not share a direct border, and historically, they have not had the same kind of disputes we see between Israel and its neighbors, such as Lebanon, Syria, or Palestine. However, Yemen's strategic location near the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait gives it enormous influence over international trade and shipping routes. This strait is one of the world's most vital choke points for oil and goods moving from Asia to Europe. Any instability here threatens global commerce and naturally attracts international powers. The key factor that pulls Israel into the Yemen conflict is the involvement of the Houthis, a powerful Yemeni faction backed by Iran. The Houthis have been fighting Saudi-led coalitions for years, but recently they have extended their operations beyond Yemen's borders. They have targeted ships, including those linked to Israel, in the Red Sea. This is where Israel feels directly threatened. For Israel, Iran's growing influence in the region through proxy groups like the Houthis is seen as a major danger. So even though Israel and Yemen are far apart, the Houthis' ability to disrupt shipping routes and threaten Israel-linked vessels brings the conflict much closer. From Yemen's perspective, especially from the Houthi leadership, striking at Israeli targets or ships linked to Israel is part of a broader alignment with Iran's anti-Israel stance. They frame their actions as support for the Palestinian cause and as resistance against what they describe as Western and Israeli aggression in the Middle East. This creates an image of unity between Iran, Hezbollah in Lebanon, militias in Iraq, and the Houthis in Yemen, all standing as part of what they call the axis of resistance against Israel and its allies. For Israel, the danger lies in being encircled by groups loyal to Iran. In Lebanon, Hezbollah has built a massive arsenal of rockets aimed at Israel. In Gaza, Hamas continues its fight. In Syria, Iranian-backed groups have gained footholds. And now, in Yemen, the Houthis are launching attacks that threaten Israeli-linked ships. This wider picture makes Israel see Yemen not as a distant problem, but as another front in a multi-pronged conflict. What makes this situation even more concerning is the way global powers are involved. The United States has been conducting operations against Houthi missile sites in Yemen to protect international shipping. At the same time, Iran continues to supply the Houthis with weapons and drones, allowing them to project power far beyond Yemen's borders. Israel, meanwhile, is increasingly coordinating with the U.S. and some Arab states to counter this threat. The tension is no longer limited to local rivalries, but is becoming part of a broader confrontation between Iran and its allies on one side, and Israel, the U.S., and some Arab states on the other. Another dimension to consider is the internal crisis in Yemen itself. The country has been devastated by years of war, famine, and poverty. Millions of civilians suffer from food insecurity and lack of medical care. Yet despite this humanitarian disaster, the Houthis have managed to expand their military capabilities significantly. Their use of drones and missiles has been particularly alarming, as they have targeted not only Saudi Arabia, but now vessels in the Red Sea. This shows that Yemen's conflict is no longer confined within its borders, but is spilling outward in dangerous ways. For Israel, the strategic concern is that the Houthis could disrupt maritime trade routes that are vital for its economy. The Red Sea is Israel's gateway to the Indian Ocean and Asian markets. If these routes are threatened, Israel's economy and security are directly at risk. Moreover, any attack on Israeli ships could force Israel into a direct military response, and this could open yet another front of conflict at a time when Israel is already heavily engaged elsewhere. The possibility of direct confrontation between Israel and the Houthis raises the question of escalation. Would Israel carry out strikes inside Yemen if its ships continue to be targeted? Would the Houthis respond by further expanding their attacks? And how would Iran react to such escalation? These are the unknowns that make the situation extremely fragile and dangerous. Looking at history, Israel has not hesitated to take preemptive military action when it feels its security is under threat. The airstrikes against Iranian positions in Syria are a clear example. If Israel concludes that the Houthis pose a significant and growing danger, it might choose to act militarily. On the other hand, Yemen is geographically distant, and engaging there would require significant resources and coordination. This is why Israel is likely to work closely with the U.S. and regional partners before making any such move. At the same time, the Houthis are not just acting independently. Their connection to Iran means that any Israeli action in Yemen could trigger wider consequences across the Middle East. Iran could use Hezbollah in Lebanon to increase pressure on Israel's northern front. Militias in Iraq and Syria could also be mobilized. This interconnected network of groups means that what happens in Yemen does not stay in Yemen, but becomes part of a much larger chessboard of conflict. The question then becomes, is war on the horizon between Israel and Yemen? While a full-scale war may not be imminent, the risk of escalating clashes is very real. The Houthis have already shown they are willing to strike Israeli-linked targets, and Israel cannot ignore this threat. Even a limited exchange of attacks could have major consequences, especially if it disrupts global shipping and trade through the Red Sea. Such disruption would affect not just Israel but Europe, Asia, and the global economy as a whole. At the same time, diplomacy and international pressure may play a role in preventing direct war. The U.S. and other powers have an interest in keeping the Red Sea safe for trade, and they may try to contain the situation before it spirals out of control. Regional states like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates also have a stake in preventing further chaos in Yemen, as they have already been heavily involved in the conflict there. In conclusion, the tensions between Israel and Yemen highlight the interconnected nature of Middle Eastern conflicts. What seems like a distant war in Yemen has direct consequences for Israel's security and for global trade. The involvement of Iran, the U.S., and other regional powers only adds more complexity. While a direct war may not break out immediately, the danger of escalation is very high, and the world is watching closely to see what comes next. This issue reminds us that in the Middle East, conflicts are rarely isolated. They spread, they connect, and they create ripple effects that can be felt across continents. Whether Israel and Yemen end up in direct confrontation will depend on the choices made by their leaders, the actions of their allies, and the willingness of the international community to step in before it is too late. The story of Israel and Yemen is still unfolding, and as the situation develops, it will continue to shape not just the region, but global security and trade. The world can only hope that restraint and diplomacy will prevail over escalation and war, because a wider conflict in the Red Sea region is something no one can afford.